Hello everyone, this is Robert and this is the xTool P2 55 watt CO2 laser machine. In this video I'm going to be covering kind of all the stuff that I didn't cover in my other videos and kind of giving you a final review of the machine. So please feel free to use the chapters to skip around, but we're going to be covering the autofocus, which is actually pretty cool. We're going to be testing the output of the laser tube to see if it matches what it advertises. We're going to be testing out the two cool features of this, which is the curved surface engraving as well as kind of the batch processing. I'm going to be playing around a little bit doing some stone engraving, and then at the end I'm going to give you kind of my final pros and cons and thoughts and impressions now that I've had this thing for a little bit and had some time to play with it. So let's dive right into the autofocus system. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. There's a couple things I got to talk about before we go into the rest of the review. First off, let's talk about promotions. xTool is running a Father's Day promotion. This is why I'm releasing the video on Father's Day, and they claim that this is the largest promotion that they're going to be doing this year on the P2, so check out the details down below in the description for more information on that. Secondly, they're also doing a giveaway. Yay! If you put a comment down below, I will be doing a giveaway on one of the conveyor feeders, which is pretty cool. So all you need to do is leave some sort of comment down below, which obviously helps the video, and I'll be picking through that for the automatic conveyor. This will be running from the 18th, which is today, through the 22nd, so make sure you post a comment down below if you want a free conveyor feeder. Lastly, let's just dump right into the conclusion, because that's why people come to these videos. You want to hear the conclusion. I like it, I'm keeping it. That is pretty much the conclusion. It has little quirks and things like that that I'm not super thrilled about. I think most of those are in the software, but the hardware is good, the hardware is nice, and this is going to be replacing my main laser. I think that's the highest praise I can probably give a product. As a YouTuber, a lot of things kind of come through my shop and, you know, I do reviews here and there, but to actually keep something, that's saying a lot. This is the thing that I'm going to be using as my own. I've had my other laser for many years and I really like it, but this offers some new cool features. So in conclusion, I do like it. It is good. The software features do work with some caveats, but it will add new capabilities to my shop. So I am going to be keeping it, and this will be my primary laser. So let's get into the rest of the review, starting with the autofocus. So let's start off by talking about the autofocus on this machine. It works pretty good, and I'm overall pretty happy with it, and it has some interesting little features with it. So first thing we want to do is load up the xTool Creative Space, and then we'll just hit refresh, and that will kind of take a picture of what's inside. And that's what I've already done here. So now we can take our material and set it inside. It uses a combination of the wide angle camera, the head camera, and this laser, which you can't see right here, to measure the thickness of the workpiece that you're cutting or engraving. So I've got this piece of 5 or 6 millimeter stock sat down right there, and all we have to do is hit refresh again. This will take a picture of what's inside, and then we can see the location of that material, just like that. And now we can click this little button right here, move it over, and let's just go kind of dead middle, and then it will move the head over, take an image of that, and that will give us our thickness or whatever the material offset is. So it measured this at 6.1 millimeters, so that is what it will use to focus the laser. And what's kind of interesting is if you see this laser beam, as we move it up, it moves along there. So it's using that somehow to measure the height of the workpiece. Now to test the accuracy, I've got a parallel just with tape on one side since it's very reflective. The camera doesn't love that. I'm going to set that in the middle. This is about 3.35 millimeters. So we measured 6.1. So what? This should be like 9.5. So we're going to refresh that one more time. It's going to take another picture. And it works fairly quickly. This is over Wi-Fi, and you can see that it's, you know, not instantaneous, but it's totally workable. Click in the middle. Take a picture. and this has been measured at 9.4. And for my testing, this is about what I found. It's plus or minus 0.1 millimeters, which is totally fine for the focus of the laser head. I know on my other laser it is a manually adjustable up and down, and I am not getting that within 0.1 millimeters. So 0.1 millimeters is perfectly fine for this purpose. Maybe it's not great for like CNC or 3D printing, but 0.1 is perfectly good for a laser. So yeah, that is how the autofocus system works. So a couple of notes about the autofocus system. There are some things that you have to think about while using this. Because I have the riser base on here, you can put very tall things inside of here. You can put something that goes all the way from here all the way up. You just kind of remove this. And now we can put really tall things in here. I forgot exactly what the specs say. But you have to kind of still have the top roughly where that slat bed was. So you might need to kind of rest it on something on the bottom. You also have all of these little slots on the side that you can slide the tray in at different levels to kind of adjust where it is. But the head itself only has, you know, 1.5 inches or 2 inches or whatever worth of travel up and down. So you still have to be within that range, if that makes sense. So if you're engraving something that's like this high, you're gonna need to have to raise it up a little bit until it's about this level. So you always have to pay attention to that you have to be within the range of height within this machine. Some of the larger industrial machines actually have a movable bed that just moves up and down, and you can just kind of move it up to the head. This is a little bit different. The head actually moves, and it has a somewhat limited range, so you need to make sure that your workpiece is within that right range to where the head can actually autofocus to it, if all that makes sense. Okay, so now it's time to test the laser output power. I'm using my laser power tester meter thing. More information down below in the link, but basically just measures the temperature rise as the laser hits it, and it's calibrated to tell me the laser output power. And after running it, I'm getting about 53 watts, which is pretty good. This is to be expected because on this machine I can't get to the actual laser output. All the mirrors do decrease the amount of power you're seeing, and unfortunately there's a right angle mirror right at the end of the tube, so I can't put the probe right at the tube, so it's to be expected that it's going to be a couple watts less, and this thing is probably plus or minus a couple watts. So 53 is to be expected, and I'm definitely happy with that result. It's within range. I think I'm comfortable calling this a 55 watt laser tube. I think one of the most useful features of the xTool, other than the automated pass-through, is probably the curved surface engraving. So I want to show you how that works. So I'm going to just take a piece of board, just something I was using earlier, and then I'm going to take a 30mm extrusion, and we're basically going to line it up on the bed like that, and I'll show you how you can map to that and then engrave something on it. But first, let's kind of screw it up. Let's go ahead and engrave on this without doing the mesh. You know, I'll just kind of show you what it looks like if you didn't compensate for this kind of angle. So all I'm doing for this setup is I'm using 2 of those extrusions to make it flat, since I don't really want to reliably focus on it when it's curved or, you know, slanted. So I'm just using 2 of them, making a little table out of it, using the autofocus that you saw earlier, measuring the top of that, and then I'll take one off, then it's slanted, and then I'll hit engrave just to show what it looks like when things are basically out of focus because they're not all at the exact same depth. And here is the finished piece. Obviously it looks bad. You've got out of focus, in focus, and then kind of out of focus again. The E messed up because when I put it down it was flat. That's what I focused on, but then when I dropped it down, this edge raised up a little bit because the pivot was like here, so it just kind of hit against the E. But yeah, obviously the I and the B are in focus, everything else is kind of out of focus. This is why you need curved surface engraving. So let's get a new piece, and then we'll actually use the mesh thingy. We'll map this out, and then we can actually engrave on it when it's tilted. So once you have curve process selected, you can click curve measure, and this will run you through the little, I guess, wizard or tutorial on how to adjust everything. Basically what you're going to do is you're going to mark a point. You can see there's vertex 1, vertex 2. Vertex 1 is going to be the upper left corner, and then vertex 2 is going to be the lower right corner. And you kind of have your little control, and what I'm doing here is I'm just typing in different distances to manually move the head around to where the laser dot is on the top left, and then I will click mark, and then you go down to the bottom right and click mark. It's maybe a little bit fiddly. If you have a really large work piece, there can be maybe some issues because it takes a while and you got to kind of adjust that distance. I wish there was just kind of a way to hold down the keyboard and jog the machine fluidly, but there really isn't. So you got to kind of like change these dimensions, move over a little bit. And the thing is, you don't really want to go outside. Like for what I'm doing, you really don't want to go outside of that work zone. You want to kind of do it on the inside. If you kind of go outside, it's going to maybe lose some of those points and create a bit of a weird mesh. But generally speaking, it's pretty straightforward. Click mark and then hit next. And in this next screen, you can actually set the density. Pretty straightforward. We're doing a really flat piece, so I don't really need a lot of granularity here. So I'm just doing a row 5 by 10. This will do 50 points. I'm going to try something later where I do one with a lot higher resolution, but this is ultimately resolution or the granularity of what you're measuring. It takes a few seconds, couple seconds for each one, so if you're doing hundreds and hundreds of points, it's going to take some time. It's going to take a while. This 50 points, this is in real time. It really doesn't take that much time, but it isn't a super fast process. It doesn't just take an image snapshot. And it will kind of interpolate the mesh based on these points that you use. So you can see on the next screen, it'll be just this nice flat plane. And now that all 50 points are measured, you can see the plane. You can adjust the smoothness and tension. I'm not really sure what the tension is. I do wish it kind of had like a standard isometric view. Like here you can see it's, on the slope, but it's kind of hard to really tell. So anyway, that is our mesh. Now we have this, I guess, box or frame inside the program, and now we can just adjust whatever it is we're cutting, engraving, whatever. We can put that on it as if it was a flat surface, and you don't really have to think about it anywhere beyond here. It just will kind of map it to it just like that. And obviously you saw me make the subscribe a little bit smaller. Well, it's up on that angled plane, so the width is a little bit less than when it was standard. And then we can just hit start, send it over, and we're ready to engrave it. There we go. Everything is engraved, and you can see it is flat. I do need to adjust the settings a little bit. It kind of goes a little bit slower, as you saw when it's doing this, so you will need to kind of adjust your settings on this, because this is definitely a little bit darker than the other one, but it is consistent across the whole thing, even though it was up on an angle, so pretty cool stuff. So let's try something a little bit more difficult. This is a little object that my dad turned. I actually use it to keep my BattleBots winners tokens in, which is kind of cool. But this obviously has a bit more of a curve to it. So let's use that same process and map this out and see what the mesh looks like, because it is very curvy. So as you can see, the process is pretty much the same as it was for the other piece. You just kind of define the upper left, define the bottom right, and go through the process. And of course, you could kind of set the resolution here. So I guess in theory, if you wanted to do like a grid of, 100 by 100 points or 200 by 200 points, I didn't test what the upper limit is, but you could kind of create a higher granularity based on creating more dots in the horizontal and vertical. I think the only issue that I have with this is it only does a square or a rectangle. It would be nice if you could just draw maybe like a polygon, if you could draw a circle or something like that using the camera and then actually define the area by that. And that is definitely something that they could do in a software upgrade, but right now it is just a square or a rectangle, which is kind of limiting for a circular object like this. And here you can see what the finished mesh looks like. I did have to do this a couple different times because when it has too many points that are outside of the object area, they were going all the way down to the table. If there's too many of these, it will create a incorrect mesh and it won't let you continue. But as you can see here, this is a perfectly usable mesh. It has a couple points that go on the outside of this part, which go all the way down to the table, but that's perfectly fine. We're not going to be engraving in that area. And it got the nice curvature of the inside of that part just right. So I think overall I'm pretty pleased with how the curved surface mapping works. I don't really know how to wrap my head around this just yet because I've never had this as a feature, and when I don't own a tool or don't have that capability, it's really hard for me to think about that. I've never done engraving or cutting on a curved or not flat surface because it's not something that I've ever been able to do. So stay tuned. I will probably find a use for this somewhere in the future. Right now I'm just trying to think of all the different ideas. The couple little things that I don't like that are kind of gripes that could be improved in the future, I'm going to tell xTool about this, is it would be really nice if you could just take the camera image and then just draw a box, draw a circle, even use the drawing tools that are in the creative space, just draw that and say that is my bounding box, that is what I want this mesh to apply to. That would be really nice. And then kind of when you're done using the mesh, obviously it doesn't do any 3D mapping of what it would look like. That's maybe a bit more complicated, but just being able to draw a circular or a polygon mesh would be really helpful. And also being able to kind of do keep out zones. In that mesh that you saw, they had a couple dots that went all the way down to the surface. It would be kind of nice if I could click on one of those and just hit delete and delete them out of the mesh. There's not a lot of manual modification that you can do with the meshing. Maybe there is, and I didn't play with it as much, but yeah, overall, I think it works great as a first feature. This is the first time that they're introducing it, and this is their first go at it. And I think it works really well, but it is a little bit time consuming. You might have to run the mesh a couple different times to kind of get everything situated just right. It's going to take a little bit of trial and error, but it absolutely does work. Another really cool feature of the xTool P2 is the Smart Fill. This allows you to batch process similar sized items. So let's say you have a tile like this and you're going to be doing a bunch of them and you just want to throw them onto the bed haphazardly and copy the design across a lot of them. This is what the feature will do. So let's go ahead and test that out. So I'm putting the slat bed back in here and just kind of loading these tiles in randomly, and we'll see how this works. And unfortunately, this ended up not working out. There was not enough contrast between these dark gray tiles and the background, so the software just gave me this error that, autofill failed. And I clicked the More Info tab, and it told me that, yeah, you need to have enough contrast between it. So I took and put this on a cardboard background, thinking that would help a little bit, but there just doesn't seem like there's enough light inside this chamber to see the real contrast of it. So it's kind of a bummer. I tried this a couple different ways, and unfortunately these tiles aren't going to work, so we're going to have to switch to something different. Since the dark gray tiles didn't work, I just cut these out. I just cut these out of some 2mm cardboard. Obviously, if you were doing this, you wouldn't cut these out, then put them on the bed, then apply the logo, then autofill, and then you would just do this all at once. But hey, we're just testing here. So let me show you how this process works in the computer and what this ends up looking like. So here we are inside the xTool creative space. And you can see that I already went ahead and captured, but I'll just hit refresh again, and it will capture the image of what's inside. And the darker box here in the middle is where I did the close capture. So this is kind of like the close view. So just for grins, we'll go ahead and focus on this one. Now it gives our focus distance. Cool, so 2.1. And now we're going to click Image. I'm going to load my logo, fit it to the space. I'm going to cut this down to size. There. So now that we have this selected, we should be able to just click Autofill or Smart Fill. And as you can see, it doesn't quite capture all of them. So I'm going to go rearrange these real quick and see if they're, clustered together better, if that helps. Let's go see what that does. So I'm going to refresh this another time. Now what I did is I clustered them kind of over here in the corner because there's kind of more uniform lighting there. So let's see if that helps. So we'll just take this, put it in that middle one. Now let's try Smart Fill. Yeah, so it still misses this one down here, and this one is just not really centered. Let's take a closer look at that. The wide angle and the close camera have slightly different perspectives, obviously, because one's wide. So yeah, that is not centered. And if you look at I guess they're all roughly centered. That one might be a little bit out. We kind of make this one a little bit better. But yeah, not really all that impressed. And oh yeah, when you click Smart Fill, it just kind of keeps stacking them on top, which is kind of weird. So yeah, I'm not really sure if this feature is ready for prime time. Obviously, I could try some other things. I could try different lighting. I could try different materials, but this is kind of the example that they gave in the software, is these kind of, cardboard or the light plywood discs on the slatted background. So this is the example of what should work. So not really too impressed with this feature. So even though I wasn't able to get the Smart Fill working, I was still able to engrave on one of these tiles, and it turned out kind of cool. I'm not sure how that shows up on camera. The cool thing about lasers is that every material is going to engrave or cut just a little bit different. These were just a tile that was on clearance at Lowe's, and I just kind of picked them up, and yeah, it just kind of took the surface finish off a little bit. And you may or may not be able to tell, but it's actually down in there enough to where there is a little bit of a lip, so it definitely etched down in it, and it's really cool. It just kind of has a bit of a different tone and a different sheen, but yeah, that would have been cool. Okay, so it's time for the long-winded conclusion. I'm going to kind of break this up into pros and cons, as you would. So let's start with the cons. Now, keep in mind, not all these cons are like hard cons. They're just kind of maybe little observations that I've had. The first one's a good example of that. This doesn't have a full stand on it. It would be really nice. They've spent a lot of time and effort for this ecosystem with the conveyor and everything else. They've built this nice base for it, but it doesn't really have a stand. This won't fit on a workbench. Who are they kidding? I have 3 feet deep workbenches, which is bizarre for most people, and it kind of barely fits on a 3 feet deep workbench. This really needs to be on a stand on its own. These are too big for desktop machines, so it really needs a nice stand. The other thing about that is it has so many little accessories. If you go for the full meal ticket and get the conveyor and extensions, I'm trying to think what else this comes with. If you get all the stuff with it, you got to store all that stuff. And I have a whole pile of crap over here from all the extensions and conveyors and all that other stuff. And a nice stand would be really cool to where all that stuff kind of tucked in, or at least just had a big open hole that you could shove it in. So not having a stand is a little bit of an oversight, I think, with as much of the accessories as this has. Yeah, accessories don't really have a home. I have my cheat sheet here. The autofocus, let's discuss the autofocus a little bit. I'm putting this a bit in the cons category because it's fiddly. I like that it has autofocus and it works better than the other autofocuses that I've come across. Even, you know, what's the Epilogue? Even Epilogue has a pretty nice autofocus, but I kind of like this one better because you can just visually click it. But with the base installed, you have this huge range of room that you can put something into, and you don't always know if the head's going to run into it. There really isn't a good jogging function that's really quick and easy to where you can just jog the head across and be like, oh yeah, it's going to run into it. You got to kind of have this relatively narrow band. It's 3 inches or 75 millimeters that the top of the piece needs to be within, and if you open up the bottom of this and shove something in, you don't always know if the top is going to be in the right area. I kind of like the old school machines where the whole bottom bed just kind of ratchets up and down. You can lower it and be like, oh, that's a bit too low. Oh, that's just right. This is kind of a pain because, yeah, you have these slats in it and you can kind of move it up and down. It's kind of tricky. In theory, it's fine, but in practice, it's a little bit fiddly, and I wasn't too thrilled with that. It does have a smaller exhaust than the others. It has like a 2.5-inch hose or something. I think it's been adequate, but it's just kind of interesting that it has this little tiny exhaust on it. I've been using this with the Gwick HEPA air filter, which I really, really like. Link down below. I really like it with that, but I suspect that if you didn't use it with some sort of extra exhaust or venting, the venting would be a little bit inadequate. 2.5 inches just seems kind of a little bit too small. Visibility sucks on this machine. I know this is nitpicky. Filming this is impossible. You've seen all the footage on this. You can see I've got a stuck pixel on the camera. It's grainy, it's dark. The whole inside of the machine is black. The lights are inadequate. I know that sounds kind of nitpicky, but when you're using this machine, you're going to grab a flashlight and you're going to be using the flashlight inside of it. Even with the amount of lights I have out here in the shop, it's really hard to see inside, which is just something that I didn't expect. Live view. This machine doesn't really have live view. You can capture and send that over as an image, but it doesn't have live view, and there's definitely been a couple instances where I would have liked to see maybe a real time. For instance, if you've got something that you're trying to line up, you take a picture of it and it's like, oh, it's a little bit of a, you know, like this. I want to maybe be able to just move it until it looks right, but you kind of have to move it a little bit, take a picture, move it a little bit, take a picture. So having live view would be nice. They have 2 cameras. It would be kind of cool if you could go into a low resolution, semi-low frame rate and have at least a live view to where you could be able to position something. That'd be kind of cool. Status of the job. This is something that I was really surprised about. You have this really cool like display that goes through the glass on the top on the other side, and it kind of has a little, you know, bar meter that shows you the progress. Nowhere could I find that it tells you the time left. When you're running it on the computer, it will tell you how much time has elapsed, but there's no percentage indicator. There's nothing to tell you how much time is left, and what's up on the display on the machine, it really doesn't seem to be accurate. It's like, oh, I have about a quarter of it left. Cool. If you're running a really big job, like if you're running something that's a half-an-hour engraving job, okay, you got 3 bars left. What does that really even mean? So I was kind of surprised that with all this, you know, camera vision and AI and all this other stuff, that tell me how many minutes are left. Tell me how much time is left. Tell me how much has progressed. It does that, but where is it in the percentage of the job? Kind of surprised it's missing that feature. I'm sure if you use Lightroom, Lightroom would give you that, but the base software doesn't have it, and the machine doesn't show it on top, which it maybe should. That's kind of interesting. More advanced controls are definitely missing. I would like to maybe have control over the air assist. I'd like to maybe be able to turn the air assist off. If you've ever cut or engraved like paper or lace or something like that, you might want to turn the air assist off for that because it just kind of blows the thing all around. A lot of these advanced features are missing, and I personally always get a little bit annoyed when the software treats you like you're just an absolute amateur. Like this tray, if you select slats, the tray has to be in, and it has to be in the exact right position. If you have it slightly lower, like a couple millimeters lower, it will yell at you. But you can select, instead of slats, you can select base, and then it doesn't yell at you. It would be really nice if there was just maybe an override checkbox where you could override it, because I don't know, maybe I don't care if the base is in the right spot. Little things like that. There's a lot of advanced features where you just can't turn it off. You have to learn what the machine is thinking and then just go with what the machine wants you to do. No control panel on the front. I just really wish one of these companies would put a simple control panel. You saw when I was doing the surface mapping thing how hard it is to click a button, wait a second, click a button, to jog the head over. It would be really nice if, on like my other machine, you just had a physical membrane key switch or something to where you could just jog, 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 down, down. I would really love to have an actual user interface or some kind of control panel on one of these machines. So, in addition, I think the last and final con that I have is the batch processing, the autofill didn't work, and I suspect that I might have gotten lucky with the surface engraving. There's a lot of things I might have just gotten lucky with. Some of the features just take a little bit more fiddling than you would think. Granted, they're kind of in the early phase. I think everything works if you work within the bounds that you're supposed to be in, but the features aren't like perfection. They're not rock solid, I guess you would say. I'm trying to think of how to say this, but the features are definitely there and they do work, but I think they only work in the situations that you're supposed to be using them and that they've tested them. They're not really all that intuitive outside of that. I know I'm going to come across some weird curved surface engraving. It's like, ew, it's not meant to be used like that, or oh, there's a little gotcha where it doesn't really work like that. So that's not a big deal, but I definitely was a little bit bummed out by the smart fill. I'm not going to use it. That's not how I do things. How I would normally do it is I would lay down a piece of cardboard, cut out spaces for each one of the things, lay them in the spaces, and do it like that. That's, in my mind, kind of the better way of doing it. I don't want to rely on the camera to orient and whatever. I just want to kind of cut out a template, lay them in a template. That's kind of the cleaner, safer way to do it. So not a big deal, but I definitely have to put that in the cons column. All right, so let's talk about the pros. It's really slick. I know that's kind of maybe a bit of a silly thing for a tool, and maybe that's a little bit weird for me even, but it really does look slick. This is something that you get kind of excited when you get it. If it's just like, some stamped steel thing, it's like, yep, it's a laser, but it actually kind of looks nice. It looks advanced in the shop. I've had this in my shop for a few months now, and I do a lot of stuff on Craigslist, by the way, and I've had a few people come into the shop when I'm selling something, and yeah, a lot of people look at it and like, ooh, what's that? I have a lot of cool stuff in my shop. I've got a lot of toys out here, and people are drawn to this. They look at the xTool and it's like, oh, that's a really cool thing. So it is a plus. It's neat using a tool that kind of looks advanced. The curved surface engraving is pretty cool. Like I said in the cons, it probably has some caveats that I haven't yet figured out, but I think there's a workaround. If I need to engrave something that's just, I'm not going to be able to get it flat, or it's not perfectly flat, being able to map that surface and engrave on it, that's pretty cool. It's a new feature, and that's one of the main reasons why I'm adding this to my shop, because it's something that I'm not able to do previously. So that's kind of cool. The software is definitely decent. For every other laser that I've done, and I've done at least half a dozen other lasers, I instantly go to Lightburn and just use Lightburn because the software is just unusable. And with this, I've actually just tested Lightburn, but beyond that, I haven't used it. The software I found is usable enough, it's responsive, it does what you want, and I don't find myself needing Lightburn. And Lightburn is a paid subscription. I do have a paid subscription to it, but if you're buying a new laser and you don't already have the subscription, it would be an additional cost. But for the xTool, I probably wouldn't do it initially. I would wait until there's a need for it, and then you can buy it if you need it. But for all these other machines, you kind of absolutely have to need it if you're going to do anything serious. So that's kind of nice. The dual cameras, it's the first time I've seen cameras in a laser do what you want them to do. I know in the other lasers I've talked about, oh, they don't have jogging and they don't have a manual. You don't really have to jog this machine, and I know I listed that in cons, but with this you can just plop something down, hit the camera, and then place your design over top of it, and you're pretty assured that it's going to be in the right spot. There's still some cases where I wouldn't rely on the camera, but generally speaking, the two cameras do work well. They're responsive and quick enough to where it is a nice alternative to printing out the template every time and lining it up that way. So I like the cameras. The slat bed, I have a little bit of mixed feelings on the slat bed, but I do think I like it better than the honeycomb. The honeycomb beds, you're going to get some blowback from the underside every time it kind of cuts through and passes over one of those honeycombs. You get kind of a little bit of burn mark on the backside. The slat is a nice alternative, and I like the fact that they all come out. It does take a little bit more time to kind of configure it if you don't have it in, but that's totally okay, because you can just take a honeycomb bed, pop it out all at once, put it back. This takes a little bit more time, but I like the flexibility. I like the ability to maybe take out and only have like 2 slats if there's some kind of weirdly shaped object. So slat bed's pretty cool. I do wish it had markings. I do wish that this kind of had like a homing feature to where you could just kind of snug something into the upper left as like a register or an origin point. That would be nice, but I haven't seen that in anything other than the Epilogue machine, so there you go. Last thing, the whole machine seems overall very responsive and usable. Like I said, I've done a lot of laser review videos in the past, and they're all just kind of frustratingly slow and unresponsive, and you click a button and you're kind of waiting for it. This one actually feels pretty responsive. Even doing it wirelessly over Wi-Fi, it feels pretty good, and overall I do like that. It works better than I was thinking it would, and it's definitely worked better than some of the other lasers that I've used. So yeah, pretty cool. Overall, I am going to be keeping this machine. I do like it. I do think it's a good addition to the shop. I do like using it. I've spent some time with it. The only biggest gripe that I have with it is the height. I really wish it just had a fixed head and a movable bed. I understand the design concepts and why they went with it, but that's the biggest thing that I'm going to have to get over is you really got to think, oh, this thing is 4 inches tall. Okay, that means I got to move it down to like 2A. Oh, no, it wasn't 2A, it was like 3. Let me look at the manual. Things like that are kind of complicated. You got to know how far down you need to move that thing. If you're doing flat goods or anything like, I think it's less than 10 millimeters, you don't have to worry about it. But if you're doing anything bigger than 10 millimeters, you got to kind of start thinking about it. So that's the only real big con I have. So all that being said, I am very glad to be done with the review series on the xTool. These are a lot of work, and it takes a lot of time to put these things together. That being said, check out the description down below. I have a lot more links and things like that. This is the Father's Day sale promotion, so 2 things are happening with that. One, there's a sale on the actual machine itself, so check that out down below. And additionally, there is a giveaway. I mentioned that in the beginning, but I'll mention it again. There is a giveaway. Mention something in the comments, type some comment down below, and then after 4 days, I think 5 days, I will pick a winner, and you will get a free conveyor courtesy of xTool, so that is pretty neat. I also have a link down below for the G-Wick air filter. I know xTool makes their own air filter. I haven't personally seen it yet, but I do really like the G-Wick, and I think they're a nice pairing, so they do work well together. So that is it. That is all I'm going to be doing officially on the xTool P2 laser. I'm probably going to be using it in some future projects, obviously, but if you have any questions, want to know anything more, post it down below in the comments. I am happy to ask, and hopefully this gives you a better idea if you're looking to purchase a CO2 laser, what this one is all about. So thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Bye.